Me again, Kenton Gibbs, bringing you another episode of Locked On Wolfpack. And today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCK to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Now, folks, we are going to get into all of the position groups that I hadn't talked about yet. I only talked about the linemen so far, so we've got a lot to get through today, as well as a prediction. I will try to keep it all in one episode, but if I get a little long-winded, if I go on a little of those the preacher speeches that I do from time to time, I'll make sure to bring you another episode that has the full prediction, as well as any position groups that we did not get to. But we're going to start this thing off with the linebackers, the defensive backs, and the running backs, and hopefully we can get to the quarterbacks as well. So stick around for all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Wolfpack.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alrighty, so in today's episode, again, we're going to talk about the different position groups that we got, and I tried to get some in that are going to be more easy to get out of the way and tell you about some guys from Florida State that you should be a little more familiar with in terms of their defense. Now, I talked about the defensive line last episode, but we're going to talk about the guys that the defensive line makes look good. Of course, we're talking about the linebackers and the DBs, all right? So, for the linebacking core, I believe that Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach and DJ Lundy are their main three guys, right? Those are the three that you'll see the most, even though Bethune is the heart and soul of his defense in certain ways. DeLoach, he is a good weak side linebacker. Lundy is a little bit more of a downhill. You know, he's a big thumper. He reminds me a lot of Dante Hightower, if you remember that name at all. But these three linebackers are good. They're good. They're no slouches. And again, with what we have seen out of our backs and tight ends as pass catchers so far this season, I think that we have enough to get open to create some separation, to potentially do some things in that regard. But also, I think that they're pliable enough that we could do some things in the run game as well. So we'll see how they're coming into this game, but they're pretty good. Bethune is second on the team in tackles. DeLoach, I want to say, is fourth. They're both very quality linebackers. Both do their thing as far as Bethune is a transfer from UCF, very sideline to sideline, had over 100 tackles last year, 3 interceptions, all that good stuff. And so you're looking at a linebacker that has some versatility, has a lot of different things he can do. Same thing with DeLoach. DeLoach is a little less mobile than Bethune, but still very good. Lundy will probably be the least mobile of the three, but again, still a very hard hitter. A true, when he comes and fills a gap, that gap is filled. Don't worry about that gap. Whatever you got going on, maybe not there. Maybe not where that guy is. You need to find another spot. So with that in mind, I think their linebacking core is good. And they've got some depth pieces behind them. They got some young guys coming in behind them that are pretty good. Pretty good. With that being said, that's not NC State's linebacking core. I think that some guys off the second unit for NC State could potentially start at Florida State. And that's not disrespect to them. That's not saying that they're bad players by any means. But this is one of the few, because normally you'll start to see a theme as I go through these position groups. But normally you don't see a situation where our young guys are so talented that there is no doubt in my mind that, you know, if Devon Betty was over there, he'd be a starter right away. If some of our other guys, Poole, I feel like, would be another guy that could potentially start over there. But we have what we have for right now. So obviously, I give the Wolfpack a decided edge in the linebacking core. With that said, just because I gave the Wolfpack a decided edge in this, do not be surprised if you see Tatum Bethune and DeLoach make some plays. Don't be surprised. They're big time players now. They're big time players. Okay, I'm not saying they're first rounders. I'm not saying they're All Americans. They will make some plays. They're very capable linebackers. They are good linebackers. Okay, not saying great, not saying elite. They're good. This is a good linebacking core. They're good at what they do. Next thing, So obviously, decided advantage goes to State there. Next thing is we've got to talk about the defensive backs. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about the defensive backs, I want to say this Florida State defensive backfield is has one thing in has one thing in common with the defensive backfields that we've seen out of Florida State in the past. And that thing that they have in common is that this group is very talented. They are very, very, very talented. However, they lack discipline. They lack discipline. Let me tell you how talented this group is. Of the top 5 tacklers on the team, 3 of them are defensive backs. 3 of them. That's not something that you see every day. These defensive backs are not afraid to stick their nose up in the run game. They're not afraid to make a tackle. They're not. None of those things scare these guys, right? Jamie Robinson is like a heat-seeking missile, a little bit of a pit bull. He is not a very big guy at all, right? He's a guy that I want to say they got him listed at 5'11", and I done seen the tape. I don't know if that man is any taller than 5'10", maybe a little shorter than that. But with that being said, Jamie Robinson is always going to stick his nose into the if you throwing screens out to the perimeter or if you're asking him to make a tackle, he's not afraid to do so. That's not something that he's going to shy away from. And you could probably say the same thing about Renardo Green and Akeem Dent. Both, again, 2 guys that if you need them to mix it up, if you need them to stick their nose in things, they will not have a problem doing so. So with that in mind, this becomes a very clear situation of, okay, what needs to happen in order for you to get big plays against a defensive backfield that is so willing to hit and that is so aggressive? Well, once again, Wake Forest has shown us the recipe, right? You've got to go over the top of them. You've got to go with the double moves. You've got to trust that they will they will be aggressive enough to where it is to their detriment. That's the deal here. That's the crux of this whole thing. Once you get into that space with this team, you're in the money. You're in a good spot to where you can do some things that's going to hurt this team. And that's just the reality of what you're looking at there. So, with that in mind, this defensive backfield is good. They're very talented. I think in a couple years they could have one of the best defensive backs in the ACC, let alone the country. It's possible. It's possible. Is there again? Most of these guys in their defensive backfield fairly young, fairly inexperienced. They've all got some eligibility left on them. So with that being said, I think NC State has the better defensive backfield simply because of experience, simply because these guys have seen more, done more. The reality is when you talk about what you're looking at with Robinson and Green and Dent, you're looking at a bunch of guys that again they have made some big plays and all that good stuff. They've done some good things and all that. I don't think that they have the same amount of experience, especially in big games, games that are meaningful as NC State does. And this game is very meaningful for, I believe, both programs. Um, this game is meaningful to see, like, all right, is Florida State actually back being good and relevant? And is NC State a serious team? Because serious teams don't let one loss turn into 2, turn into 3. They don't. Serious teams don't let that happen. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to hear, oh, well, plenty of teams have done that and still won 9 games. Sure, you won 9 games, but you weren't serious about achieving your potential because there is no way under God's green earth. There's a not no way under God's green earth, but there's a very, very limited chance that you were good enough to win 9 games, but not good enough to beat any one of the teams that you played over certain 3-game stretches. That's hard to believe. So, with that being said, the defensive back battle, I want to say it will go to State on the decided edge. However, Pitts being out the first half because of targeting against DJU last game is going to be that one is going to be that is an ejection or a suspension that stings a little bit for NC State from the standpoint of they have huge receivers in Wilson in McClendon, they've got some really, really big receivers. Okay. And so when you have receivers that big, you need big body DBs. I'm sorry, not McClendon, McLean. And having guys that big on the edge, you need big body corners. You need longer corners to be out there to defend and all those good things. And the only corner that we have that's over 6 feet is going to be available for the first half, I want to say, is Tayshawn Smith, who hasn't played much this year. So that's a situation where I want to give State the decided advantage, but lacking Pitts for the first half, I'd say a slight edge. I'd say a very, very slight edge to NC State. So much so that I kind of want to go to push. But I give the edge to State. I give a very, very slight edge to State in that regard. So that's just what I see there. That's what I think is going to happen in terms of, or that's what I think in terms of which group has performed better, has shown me more so far. And speaking of showing more, inflation has us showing more and more out of our wallets than ever, from cringing at the pump to eye-popping checks at our favorite restaurants. Well, inflation is hitting us all, and trust me, it hurts, and that's why I started using Upside. Upside is the incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With every purchase, I'm earning cash back thanks to Upside. To get started, download the free Upside app. Use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Next, claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with a credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card rewards or loyalty programs, you can earn up to 3 times more cash back with Upside. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCK to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCK. So now we've got to go to the other side of the ball. We have got to get to the offensive players, and let's talk about the backs and tight ends. The backs and tight ends are a very curious case for me because, and I normally like to keep the tight ends separate, but then I thought about it last week and I'm like, the running backs, fullbacks aren't really a thing that much in college football anymore. And like, you don't want to spend a ton of time dedicated to just tight ends, especially when the tight ends that we've seen thus far is, a tight end is another position where it's like kind of merging into H-back, kind of becoming a different thing, all that good stuff. So when I talk about the running backs and tight ends, okay, Florida State's running back started off the season in historic fashion. They literally had the first ever time of 300-yard rushers in one game in program history, I believe, or maybe it's been a very, very long time since it happened. But that was against Duquesne. But still, that's an impressive feat nonetheless. So when you look at these running backs, you're talking about Trayshawn Ward and Trey Benson and Lawrence Tofili. You've got 3 guys all averaging over 4.5 yards a carry. You've got 3 guys who they can all do different things. They all do different things, but they all do their thing well, right? So the reality is, when you're talking about who these guys are, how they do what they do, the question becomes, can we compete and can we keep up with this backfield, man for man, player for player, pound for pound? And my answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. If we're going like, luckily, this is not how football works. But if this was a matchup in terms of Sumo and Houston up against Ward, Benson, and Tofili, they would have a great time with that matchup. Don't get me wrong. I think Michael Allen has looked good in spurts. I think that DeMarcus Jones has looked good in spurts and all that good stuff. The reality is, I don't think that we have a third back in the rotation that matches what they've got over there. And again, tight end is a situation for us where, like, do we really want to talk about that right now? And don't get me wrong. Y'all know I love me some Tootle. Y'all know I do. So let's not pretend like I'm a Chris Tootle hater. He's a really good ball player in and of his own right. I coined the name Touchdown Tootle because he always seemed to find his way in the end zone some way, somehow. But with that being said, again, I just don't think that we have the same. I don't think that we have the same type of horses in the stable when it comes to who's coming out of the backfield and who's catching passes as tight ends for us. I don't. I don't. And that's with all due respect there. That's not saying that anybody is, that we're terrible and we don't have anybody that's worth talking about or anything like that. Not saying that. Not saying that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I don't want anybody to put that in my mouth and say, "Oh, well, Ken said that we don't have any." No, we do. But in terms of their backs to our backs, that three-headed monster, they're good. They are a very, very good trio. And I mean, let's do simple math here. Three is more than two, right? Like, let's do, I mean, I hate to be that guy, but let's do some pretty simple math here. Now, like I said, the benefit is football is not played in a way that it matters how many good backs you have because you can only put but so many of them on the field at once. Like, that's the reality. That is the reality there. So we're good from that standpoint. It's not something that we should be too worried about and pulling our hair out over and all that good stuff. There's no need. There is no need from that regard. But with that being said, this is still a situation where Florida State definitely has an edge in terms of overall talent. This is a clear cut. Florida State in terms of backs and tight ends, they've got that matchup. They've got that matchup by a mile. Now the receivers. This is the most interesting one for me. This is the most interesting one for me because there's always one battle every week that I go back and forth with and I struggle with and I toss and turn with and I say, man, who needs the nod and why? Here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, Florida State, I think, has a better receiving core by a lot because of course, you talk about Johnny Wilson, you talk about Johnny Wilson and Ontario Wilson, you talk about Micah Pittman, you talk about a lot of really good players. You talk about some really good players and players that every game there has been a different leading receiver for Florida State. So that gives them a bonus as well. That definitely, the ability of unpredictability is massive because you can't as a defense say, if we take this guy out, we're good to go, right? The same way the teams to a certain degree can say, hey, if we take out Thayer Thomas, their passing game is going to struggle. That he is Devin Leary's safety blanket. He is the guy that makes Devin Leary feel warm and cozy inside when the pocket's collapsing. He knows Thayer's going to be down there somewhere. We can take him away. We can do some things with it. That is not necessarily the case for Florida State because, again, they've got dudes all over the place. And also, their dudes either have a ton of size or a ton of speed. However, the only thing that is a worry to me about these receivers to a degree is y'all couldn't do much with Wake Forest defense. That, my friends, is concerning. That, I'm sorry to tell you, and I know a large part of that was due to Jordan Travis, getting sacked and getting beat up on in the pocket. I understand that. I'm not saying that's not a big factor in what happened there, but I'm just saying that is a defense that it's hard for me to say like, oh, it makes sense that you weren't able to muster much up against those guys. It's hard. That is very, very hard for me to accept. With that being said, again, Wilson and McClain, two huge guys, both over 6'4", both outside receivers that are just jump ball threats. They will kill you in the red zone if you let them. Not only that, Wilson can fly. He's got some wheels on him. But speaking of folks who can fly, Ontario Wilson is another guy. He can run a little bit. He can do some things as far as if you saw the first game of the year against LSU, I want to say he got behind the defense on the flea flicker, I believe it was. So, yeah, Ontario Wilson, he's a taller guy as well, 6 feet tall, but he can fly. He's got some wheels on him. He can move. That's a tough one to keep up with. And I know you're thinking, well, why would it be tough if you're naming all these good things about their receivers? Because our receivers, again, if you watch the tape, our receivers are getting open. Our receivers are making tough catches. The team still have not figured out Porter Rooks up the seam for whatever reason, which I don't know why we don't go to more, but alas, we don't. Teams have still not figured out Porter Rooks up the seam. Keon Lassane has come on strong this year. The Maryland transfer, Jones, I'm not as sure about. I haven't seen a ton of really good things out of him on film, but Devin Carter doesn't seem to have as much of a problem with concentration drops this year, which I said was the next step in him becoming a really, really good player. So with that being said, I think that people underrate the Wolfpack receiving core because we have struggled early this season. However, I don't think it's been the receiving core's fault that we have struggled the way we have offensively this year. So I would give Florida State an edge there. I would give them an edge. I think that they have a noticeable edge, but I don't think it's like a world beating. There's no way that we can keep up and make this thing a competition there. We'll be back in just a second to land this thing, but let's get a few words in from our local sponsors. And we're back. I told you I wanted to get in everything. I wanted to get in Ken's keys. I wanted to get in the quarterback position. I wanted to get in the NC State wins if, Florida State wins if. But at the moment, we're kind of running out of time here. Thank God this is an 8 p.m. kickoff, so folks aren't going to start tailgating for some time. But again, stick around. We'll get through all that. But again, linebackers, I think State has the decided advantage there. Defensive backs, I think State has a slight edge there because, again, Florida State's defensive backs, while being more talented pound for pound, I think they're aggressive to a point of a little out of control at times, a little reckless at times, which could cause problems in that regard. Running backs and tight ends, I give Florida State a definite advantage there. I don't think anybody would have any questions there. Florida wide receivers, another group where Florida State has the advantage. They've not only have more talent, but more production as well. So I think that that's clear. Stick around for the next episode where we're going to go over the quarterback position, as well as Kenton's keys, as well as Wolfpack wins if, the Noles win if, on the next episode of Locked on Wolfpack. Thank y'all so very much for coming out, Wolfpack Nation. Peace and love, y'all. And as always, go Pack.
You are Locked on Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.